Welcome to the Secret History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A photograph from 1991 shows a desert landscape in Kuwait during one of the most significant moments in its recent history. The image captures the contrast between the sandy ground and the darkened sky, the result of large fires that affected the region at that time. A photograph from 1933 in the city of Kharkiv in Ukraine is related to a period of severe food shortage that affected wide regions of the country. The historic record documents the harsh living conditions faced by the population and the social consequences of that time. A photograph from 1945 shows two survivors preparing a meal outdoors shortly after the liberation of the Dachau camp in Germany. Among them is Johnny Voste, born in what was then the Belgian Congo, recognized as the only black prisoner in that place. A photograph from 1945 in the city of Berlin shows a group of Soviet soldiers beside the youngest member of the Red Army. They are gathered among the damaged buildings of the city in a moment of rest after intense military operations. A photograph from 1956 shows a participant in a popular movement in Hungary during a period of major political and social change. The image represents the collective desire for freedom and transformation at a time of strong civic expression. A photograph from 1945 shows a group of British citizens after they were released from a period of confinement in Singapore. The image portrays a moment of reunion, relief, and hope, marking the end of a difficult phase and the beginning of recovery. A photograph from 1946 shows the city of Hilo in Hawaii at a defining moment in its history. The image records the consequences of a major natural event that affected the region, revealing the impact on buildings and on the local landscape. A photograph shows a soldier in a moment of deep exhaustion during the First World War. It was taken around 1916 in a region of Europe. The portrait emphasizes his distant gaze, reflecting the strain he experienced during that period. A photograph from September 26, 1918, shows a moment connected to the beginning of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, one of the largest operations carried out by the United States Army during the First World War. A photograph from 1918 in France shows a heavy artillery cannon in action at night during one of the defining moments of the First World War. The shot lights up the dark sky, revealing the power and intensity of the operations carried out in the field. Soldiers can be seen near the equipment, coordinating movements and watching the result of the blast. A photograph from 1916 shows a field in Europe during a major international conflict in the early 20th century. It is possible to see rows of 105mm artillery shells that were used in a single military operation. A photograph from 1847 shows a historic moment of freedom and hope. The image represents the action of one person helping another to regain dignity and begin a new stage of life. The setting reflects the end of a difficult period and the beginning of a time of social change. A photograph shows an old cell used during the Salem trials at the end of the 17th century. It is located in the city of Salem in the state of Massachusetts. The place was used to hold accused people during the investigations of that historic period. A photograph shows Gian Libera, an artist known in Europe in the early 20th century for his participation in exhibitions and public shows. The image presents a man who became famous for his uniqueness and for the scientific curiosity he inspired at the time. A photograph from November 1966 shows New York City covered by a dense layer of haze caused by weather conditions and air pollution. The event drew the attention of authorities and the public to the importance of air quality and environmental protection. A photograph from 1940 shows a street performer putting on a knife-throwing act next to a child who is taking part in the show. The scene takes place in a popular entertainment setting, common at fairs and public squares at the time. A photograph from 1942 shows a child's protective mask created in the United States and inspired by the character Mickey Mouse. The item was developed to make the use of safety equipment more approachable and less frightening for children during a time of civil defense measures. A photograph from 1967 shows a historic moment during a period of intense international tension. In the image, a lieutenant from the United States Air Force stands next to a young North Vietnamese soldier in a rural area of Southeast Asia. A photograph from 1922 shows Bessie Coleman, the first black woman to earn a pilot's license. After being prevented from studying in aviation schools in the United States, she traveled to France where she learned the language and completed her training. A photograph from 1966 shows Bobby Gibb during the Boston Marathon when she became the first woman to complete the race. At that time, the official rules did not allow women to participate, so she ran without an official bib number. A photograph shows Charlie Chaplin and Helen Keller in 1919. It was taken in the United States during the writer's visit to the artist's studio. The record presents the two of them exchanging gestures and expressions of friendship and admiration. A photograph from 1906 shows Ruth Disney standing next to her younger brother, Walt Disney, still in his childhood. The image portrays a simple moment of family life long before Walt became one of the best-known figures in the entertainment world. Jim Carrey appears in a photograph taken during Christmas of 1967, still in his childhood in Canada, where he grew up with his family. The image shows the future actor in a festive setting, surrounded by Christmas decorations and the cheerful atmosphere typical of the holiday. At that time, Carrey was already showing signs of creativity and humor, traits that would later make him one of the biggest names in comedy worldwide. A photograph from June 27, 1923 in the city of San Diego, California, records the first aerial refueling in history. Pilots Lowell H. Smith and John P. Richter completed the feat using two open cockpit airplanes connected by a fuel hose in midair. A photograph from 1857 shows the United States Capitol building in Washington during the construction of its dome. The image reveals the metal structure being assembled on top of the main base, which was already completed at the time. Workers and scaffolding can be seen around the building, indicating the progress of the work. A photograph from 1968 in the city of Lviv in Ukraine shows a May Day parade. A girl appears taking part in the celebration, holding flowers and wearing festive clothing typical of the period. In the background, other people are gathered with colorful flags and decorations that adorn the city streets. A photograph from 1944 shows soldiers from the United States talking with a member of the Swiss Guard in an area near Vatican City. The American troops wear field uniforms while the Guard is dressed in his colorful traditional outfit, a historic symbol of the institution. A photograph from 1884 shows the famous Bran Castle in Romania, popularly known as Dracula's Castle. The structure, built on a rocky hill, features pointed towers, narrow windows, and stone walls that reflect the medieval architecture typical of the region. A photograph from 1914 shows Mount Sakurajima, located on the island of Kyushu in Japan. The image records the imposing shape of the mountain, surrounded by natural landscapes and villages around it. A photograph from Paris in the year 1875 shows an ornamental public fountain, typical of 19th century French urban architecture. The image reveals the aesthetic care present even in the city's functional structures, which combined practicality with elegance. A photograph from 1982 shows an improvised playing field in the heart of Manhattan in New York City, contrasting with the tall buildings and fast pace of the city. The image captures a moment of leisure and relaxation in the middle of the urban environment, where people use an open space for outdoor activities. A photograph from 1939 shows a country store located on a dirt road in rural North Carolina in the United States. The image portrays an important gathering place for the local community, where residents bought groceries, exchanged news, and spent time together amid the simple everyday life of the countryside. A photograph from 1880 in the city of Eureka Springs in the state of Arkansas in the United States shows a group of people gathered in front of small shops on a main dirt street. The wooden buildings display simple facades and business signs typical of the 19th century. A photograph shows a family from the Ozark Mountains standing in front of their cabin in the state of Arkansas in the United States. The image portrays the simple and hard-working daily life of rural communities who lived in close harmony with nature. An old Halloween costume, possibly from the first decades of the 20th century, is shown in the photograph. The image portrays a person wearing a handmade mask and simple clothes made from common fabrics and materials of the time. Costumes from that period were usually made at home, which led to curious and expressive looks. A photograph from 1950 shows a bait vending machine, a curious invention designed for fishermen. The image reveals a compact metal device installed in a public place that offered small portions of live bait, such as worms, ready to be used for fishing. A photograph shows Ronald McDonald. It was taken in the 1960s during the early expansion of McDonald's restaurants. The record presents the original look used in television commercials of that time. Richard White Bull, a member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, is shown in a photograph taken in 1899, representing the strength and dignity of the indigenous peoples of North America. The image shows him in traditional clothing with details that reflect his cultural heritage and respect for his spiritual and community roots. Three students walk through the city of Kabul in Afghanistan in a photograph taken in 1972, showing a moment of freedom and modern life in the country before major political and social changes. A lady from Ottoman high society is shown in a photograph taken in the early 1900s, displaying the refinement and elegance characteristic of the Ottoman Empire in its final years. A photograph taken in Estonia in 1912 shows a boy posing with a bicycle he built himself, an example of the creativity and ingenuity of that period. The image reveals the inventive spirit of the early 20th century, when many people built their own means of transportation using locally available materials. A photograph taken in New York City during the 1960s shows the intense movement of the streets, with classic cars, hurried pedestrians, and skyscrapers already dominating the urban landscape. The image portrays a time marked by economic growth, cultural innovation, and the rise of new lifestyles. A photograph from September 1945 shows the first class held at Lomonosov Moscow State University after the end of the Second World War. The image portrays teachers and students back together in the classrooms, marking the return of academic activities after a period of interruption. Two siblings pose for a sweet photograph in Charlottesville, Virginia, around 1916, in a portrait that captures the tenderness and family bond of childhood. The image shows the boy and the girl side by side, dressed in clothing typical of the early 20th century. Mail delivery in a rural area is recorded in a photograph from 1914. Showing a mail carrier on horseback traveling long distances to take letters and packages to farms and small communities. Brother and sister pose for a beautiful photograph in Chicago in 1945, showing the style and elegance typical of the post-war period. The image shows the two smiling, dressed in well-kept clothes that reflect the fashion trends of the time, with special attention on the charming purse the girl is holding in her hands. A young woman poses with her car in a photograph taken around 1922, portraying the beginning of a new era of freedom and modern life. The image shows her confidently standing next to her car, a symbol of status and independence during a time when women were beginning to gain more space in society. A lady with her horse on a snowy day is shown in a photograph taken in 1899, capturing the beauty and calm of a rural scene at the end of the 19th century. The image shows the woman dressed elegantly beside her horse in a snow-covered field, symbolizing the harmony between human beings and nature. A young woman sits on the sand wearing a swimsuit of the time, while several people enjoy the sunny day in the background. The scene represents the beginning of a new era of outdoor leisure, when beaches became popular places for rest and fun. A photograph taken in a rural area of the state of West Virginia in the United States around the year 1900 shows a family gathered in front of their wooden house. The setting reveals the simple and calm lifestyle of a time when many families lived close to nature. A photograph from between the 1920s and 1930s in a neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh in the United States shows three boys sitting in a small wooden cart in the middle of the street. A photograph from the 1950s shows a couple posing together in an elegant and relaxed way, reflecting the classic style of the time. The well-tailored clothes, the careful hairstyle, and the outdoor setting reveal the charm and simplicity of that period. Their gentle smiles and confident looks convey closeness and joy in a peaceful moment. A photograph from the city of Strasbourg in France on November 22, 1944, shows a French woman happily greeting an American soldier a few days after the liberation of the city. The scene portrays a moment of reunion and hope, marking the end of a difficult period and the beginning of a time of rebuilding. A photograph taken around the 1800s shows a family posing in a traditional way in front of the camera during one of the early periods of photography. The image reflects the customs and style of the time, when people gathered in studios or in front of their own homes to record important moments. A photograph from 1930 shows people celebrating Halloween in a simple and creative way. The costumes, many of them handmade from fabric and crafted masks, reflect the style and the limited resources available at the time. A photograph from 1943 in the city of Manchester in England shows a group of children playing on a residential street. The brick houses and the paving typical of the time create a simple and welcoming urban setting. A photograph from Poland in 1970 shows a workers' party building on fire during popular demonstrations. The event took place amid large protests driven by economic hardship and social discontent. A photograph from 1897 shows a woman making butter from fresh milk while reading a book. She is seated in a rural setting with household utensils typical of the late 19th century. Her simple clothing and apron indicate the daily work routine on farms of that time. A photograph taken in 1889 shows a boy next to his dog in an outdoor setting. The boy wears clothing typical of the period, with a hat and simple shoes, while the animal sits calmly beside him. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.